Adrian Quiney is a registered nurse and sideline beekeeper. He overwinters 60 to 80 colonies in the area around Hudson, Wisconsin, a Wisconsin border town 30 miles east of Minneapolis, Minnesota. His area of interest is biotechnical beekeeping, which is a collective term for methods that exploit the weaknesses of the mite to control it without the use of chemical mite treatments. Save for an abandoned 3-week foray into sugar dusting about 10 years ago, Adrian's never used chemical mite treatments. Conventional wisdom is that biotechnical beekeeping alone cannot keep one's bees alive. Combining brood breaks, conventional drone brood removal, Dutch and German drone brood removal, Varroa resistant stock, and the use of stacked 5/5 frame nuke boxes has enabled Adrian to defy conventional wisdom. He keeps records of his overwintering survival numbers by year and to date. From when he started in 2008 through April of 2021, his lifetime survival wintering totals are 457 colonies surviving through to spring from a total of 604 colonies entering winter. That is an overall survival rate of 75%. He's been able to do this from an initial purchase in the first 5 years of only 5 packages of bees. Adrian credits Mel Dislikin of Michigan for teaching him the value of brood breaks, and Mike Palmer of Vermont for introducing him to the value of nukes. Adrian has been giving talks about his methods and professing the value of nukes since 2012. This makes him a tenured nuke professor.
Thanks for inviting me to speak. My name is Adrian Quiney. I'm an RN and a sideline beekeeper in Hudson, Wisconsin. I've been keeping bees since 2008. And the purpose of this presentation is to explain the range of mite control methods that I employ. I bought a total of 5 packages, and the last of those was bought in 2012. All other replacement bees have been made by myself. I update this slide every year to account for all my winter losses. It's not here for bragging rights. Goodness knows there are a few years that are not worth bragging about. 2010 and 11, 2016, 17, for example. But I put the slide up because I am not a university trained researcher, not a conventionally trained master beekeeper, not a commercial beekeeper. And because I lack those credentials, I put this slide up as evidence that the way I keep bees has been working. And I hope that what I have to say will be useful to you. You'll note that my overall success rate, chemical-free, has been 79% in nuke equipment and 55% in conventional equipment. I prefer to winter my bees in stacked nuke boxes, but I don't want to give you the impression that nuke boxes are the answer to all problems. They're very important, but they are just one part of a whole system I've been working on. And that system is based on biotechnical methods of mite control. I don't have a slide for honey production. I was making 1,000 to 2,000 pounds a year from 12 to 15 colonies, but didn't make any last year as I was sitting on so much from 2020 and my hospital got closed and I lost my market. So I put the honey production on hold. From the previous slide, you may have seen that my most recent bad year was 2016/17. And in the hunt for non-chemical solutions, I came across this definition. Biotechnical beekeeping. According to Mark Goodwin and Cliff Van Eaton, biotechnical is a word that is now often used to describe non-chemical mite control methods. But biotechnical control can probably be defined as beekeeping management techniques specifically designed to reduce mite levels in a colony. And this resource went on to say that biotechnical controls are generally not used as the complete methods alone, but are often incorporated with IPM. I tried powdered sugar once for 3 weeks, but apart from that, I haven't used any chemical mite controls at all. I have an English person's weakness for puns, and so I felt a strong urge to bring this pun in here. Rewriting the laws. Law is a body of knowledge or tradition is passed down among members of a culture, usually orally. I'm a lawbreaker in that I am making a case that the commonly held beekeeping laws need to be questioned and changed if beekeepers in our region want to become more sustainable. My view is that these 4 commonly held beliefs or laws need to be dispelled. I'm going to spend a little time on these 4 laws. The 4 laws are: purchasing bees every year is normal, traditional beekeeping methods are viable, chemical Varroa treatments keep bees alive consistently, and commercial beekeepers are models for hobbyists and sideliners. At $150 to $200 or more for a replacement, each colony you purchase has to make at least a super of honey to cover its cost. If you learn how to overwinter bees, your bees should stop costing you money. Purchasing non-wintered bees every year is expensive and it's not normal. It's dangerous. The second point on this slide is my biggest concern, because out-of-state, non-overwintered bees. Migratory commercial beekeepers keep their bees alive by serial applications of chemical treatments. I was just reading this evening, my bee culture came through, and the guy who writes on the inside back page was saying that some commercial beekeepers now treat with amitraz 10 times a year. Nothing else, just amitraz, and it's not working. And for those that it is working, they feel like they have to do it. They have no choice, because if their bees die, they go bankrupt. And this is not meant to be judgmental. They can't afford to take risks, but they have to operate very differently than we do. But it's widely acknowledged that the Varroa problem is really a virus problem, because the viruses the mites transfer, they kill the colonies. To be even more specific, it's the deformed wing viruses, and those viruses are invisible to us. Commercial beekeepers keep their mites at a very low level to control the viruses, and northern beekeepers, even if they want to, can't keep up with the chemical regimen over the winter. It's safer to make new colonies from those that have survived our winter, because if they had been carrying those, the worst viruses, the fatal ones, they wouldn't have survived. My concern is that if you buy bees from elsewhere, viruses which were chemically suppressed may infect your other bees, and you won't be able to make any overwintering progress. So the law is that traditional beekeeping methods are viable, but the data suggests otherwise. The Bee Informed Partnership data from Minnesota, Wisconsin, 2008 to 2019 showed that wintering losses of 54% for those who treated, and wintering losses of 62% for those who didn't treat. And that's roughly half any way you cut it. And I would give more recent data, but the BIP website was undergoing a transformation at the time I wrote this, and the data wasn't available. But that's what traditional beekeeping has become now, a tradition of death and loss. I've added the sometimes to this law. Chemical Varroa treatments sometimes keep bees alive. Well, 54% losses might be good enough if you wintered twice as many colonies as you need. It's a lot of fun to make new colonies and raise your own queens, but I think you can do better than 54%. These are averages. Some beekeepers are adept at wintering bees and are comfortable with the regimen of test, treat, retest, retreat that's required to keep bees alive in the context of the traditional hive system. But the fact that on average only 46% of those colonies stayed alive show that there are not that many local beekeepers who are succeeding with chemicals. So commercial beekeepers are very different from hobbyists and sideliners. Most of them migrate their bees, and this means that they are able to open their hives, monitor mites, and then suppress the viruses by killing the mites. you are not operating in the same conditions. It's rare that you can open your bees between December and March, and very often November and April don't look that hot either. The point of this slide is that a lot of the protocols written for mite treatment seem to be written for commercial beekeepers. Red Green was a PBS show for many years, and I don't remember a beekeeping episode, which is the same because beekeeping seems perfect for Red Green, but his man's prayer seems a perfect vehicle to use as a transition between the beekeeping present and the beekeeping future. I'm a beekeeper, but I can change if I have to, I guess. So what changes are you prepared to make? If you want to consistently have enough bees in the spring, then you should be prepared to make some changes, but how far are you prepared to go? The following suggestions should result in more overwintered colonies. I have two sets of suggestions because some of you will be watching the presentation saying, yeah, that's all well and good for that guy over in Hudson, Wisconsin, that English guy, but I don't think it's going to work for me. So this first set of suggestions is very short, very simple for those who want to have better results but don't want to change much. The second is for those who are prepared for more radical change. A radical change is as different as changing your vehicle from a V8 to a Prius. If you want better results but don't want to change too much, this is the easiest way to go. If on average half your bees survive and you winter twice as many as you want, you'll end up with what you need. It's just simple math. But the second one is interesting. I have a circle of friends who've become sustainable, and it happened after they stopped buying bees from out of the area. Their survival rates just picked up. If you have surviving colonies, split them. Don't supplement your apiary with out-of-area bees that might be carrying the latest deformed wing virus. If you have to buy bees, buy split or overwinter colonies from successful local friends. Now, this slide is leading into my more radical method of beekeeping. The cartoons give you an overview of my season. Going clockwise around the screen, in the winter, the colonies are in 5/5 frame nukes, and I am in my recliner. In the summer, some of them are transitioning to larger 10 frame equipment, and by fall, I have made more nukes and transitioned as many colonies as I can back into them. And then in the winter, they're grouped together and will remain that way until the following spring. Now, the remainder of my presentation is devoted to showing you how I keep bees without resorting to chemical mite interventions by following these principles and methods as I cycle through the year. So we've got, there we go. We start with insulation and skinny cavities. And I say skinny cavities because in that case, that means 5 frame nuke boxes. But people have success with 4 frame nuke boxes as well. People have success with divided deeps. But for me, my success vehicle is stacked 5 frame nuke boxes, 2 5s. I start my season with overwintered 5/5 frame nuke colonies. We know that the colony of bees is warm-blooded, but the individual insects are cold-blooded. In this photo, you see that I have pieces of 2-inch styrofoam insulation stretch-wrapped tightly against the outer long sides of the outermost 2 5/5 frame nukes. And my standard setup is to squish a group of 4 of them together to share heat. What the photo doesn't show is that there is another piece of 2-inch piece of foam sitting on top of a piece of plastic sitting on top of each colony, and the wooden cover there overlaps them and is just there to keep the mice out. Heat is energy. Honey is stored energy. And also, if the honey in an insulated cavity itself, it can store heat in the same way that your coffee holds heat longer in an insulated mug. There is something about this setup that works in synergy with the bees' need to overwinter and then build up in the spring. And I will be forever grateful to Michael Palmer of Vermont for publicizing the concept of overwintering nukes. In an insulated cavity, the colony can devote fewer bees to maintaining the temperature, and the bees that are employed in raising brood can do so much more effectively in narrow nuke boxes. I use 10-frame equipment when I want to make honey or grow a colony large enough to split it, but for the rest of the time, I keep the colonies in much smaller cavities. My optimal configuration for wintering is 2 stacked 5/5 frame boxes per colony. Now, this is just one basic nuke recipe. Starting with, just want to say that I think this is the easiest way to get some experience with 5/5 frame nukes. Number one, start in a 3 or 5 frame box around July the 4th to the 14th with a queen cell. Include 1 to 2 frames of sealed brood from a low mite colony. Do not disturb for 2 to 3 weeks. And I say around July the 4th to the 14th because if you start them earlier than this, say in late May or early June, by fall they can grow so strong that so quickly that they may swarm away when the goldenrod flow starts. It is possible to avoid that by rubbing brood from them earlier, but it takes a lot of attention and it's really easy to mess up. Now, number 2, add a second box of drawn frames when the queen is laying to make a total of 10 frames. If you added a ripe queen cell on July the 4th and left her alone 2 to 3 weeks later, you should find the colony is queen ripe. And that's a great time to add a second layer of frames. I like to move a frame of larva or sealed brood up to the second level and place an empty frame into the space that I took it from. At this point, you are around the end of July towards the beginning of August, and the flow is slowing or over. And the bees are much less inclined to draw comb, and that's why I'm suggesting that it's best to add drawn comb at that time. Now, number 3, have the content to weigh 50 pounds. The total of the hive and the contents to me with my equipment is 75 pounds by mid to late October. And what that looks like in the colony, if you wonder what it looks like inside, is that the top box of frames is completely full of stores. Every one of them needs to be full. And I start weighing after the goldenrod is done and feed after that if need be. On average, it might take 1 to 2 gallons of feed to get the whole con to weigh 75 pounds. And number 4, snuggle the colonies together by late November for shed heat and leave them alone until at least mid-March. I want the colonies all to face south by around Thanksgiving. I set them in groups of 4 wherever possible because I find that to be the easiest size group for me to deal with. And here you can see a range of things going on in this July photo. The colonies in single boxes are coming queen right and awaiting second levels. And you can see there are also some large colonies in 10-frame equipment I'm using to draw deep frames. And in the top left, you see a colony stacked 3 5-frame boxes high. I was using that one as a brood resource. The single boxes that happen to be close to each other are faced in opposite directions and are different colors and are topped by a different color rock. All of that was intended to make it easier for the returning mated queen to find her own colony and not accidentally get killed by entering someone else's. This photo is at an awkward angle, but it shows a couple of things. It might not be obvious, but I use 2-inch pink insulation on top of the nukes all year round. It's painted to make it last longer. If it's unpainted, it thins out in the sun If I put that pink styrofoam directly on top of the nukes, the bees just chew right through it. So I use a plastic cover, that's basically just a piece of plastic to keep them off it. The one on the left is a plastic greenhouse material. The one on the right is an old chicken feed bag. On top of each foam cover is a rock or brick to keep it there. And one important point is that in order for the insulation to work, it has to fit flush to the plastic or feed bag against the hive with no gaps. Sometimes the insulation is bowed or warped and it doesn't fit flat. And when that happens, I have to flip it over or add an extra rock. These colonies are in August. And you can see there are plenty of bees and there is some bearding happening. They're queen right and they're healthy. And here on the left, in the left photo, you can see some reflectics. That's also known as double bubble, and it's like a silver bubble wrap that's used in construction, and you can get it from Home Depot if you want to. And I put that piece of reflectics on top of the colony that I was going to feed. And so I covered almost all of that top and just left a couple of inches at the end. And then in the second box, the second photo, you can see there's a couple of nuke boxes that have got Hive individual frame feeders in them. And I lift those boxes up, one of those boxes, and put it directly on top of the box with the reflectics on it. So it looks like, in actuality, I've made like a whole hive top feeder by combining both a nuke and a frame feeder. And the bees just run up the inside and then take it down below the reflectics. I put the reflectics there because when the times that I tried it by just without anything above there, what happens is the bees just build all this wild comb, and then when you take the box containing the frame feeders off, it's a real mess, and it takes a lot of work to sort it out. It's my preference to feed as much as I need to feed in one shot, and which is why I use these frame feeders, because they can hold several gallons. The last photo shows me weighing a colony. It shows a 5/5 colony on the bathroom scale, up to weight for my 75 pounds and all ready for winter. So let's just revisit this slide just to show you where we are. So next we're moving on to physically removing the mite. Taking a sip of water here. Much of my biotechnical system is designed to favor the production of bees at the expense of mites. However, during the growing season, I use these two methods to remove and kill mites. I'll start with basic drone brood cutting, as it's the easiest bang for your buck. Basic drone brood removal starts in the spring, usually April, when I put a medium frame into the stronger colonies. I push popsicle sticks into the frame's top groove to give them a place to start the comb, and then they start to draw it out. Now, when I say the stronger colonies, I saw a study that a guy working with Tom Seeley had, and he said that the threshold in the spring was about 15,000 workers. When they got about 15,000 workers, they were inclined to make drones. That's when they started to feel comfortable. But it's just as easy just to pick the strongest ones. You don't have to count the bees. Now, more of the frame gets filled with drones, and then they start to work underneath it. You can see that this frame has been filled and sealed within the frame itself, and then they began to work on the bottom, and that strip at the bottom contains eggs and larvae. So even after I've cut out the sealed drones, there is still mite attracting drone larvae available when I put the frame back into the hive. And this basic drone removal method helps eliminate mites because the drone larvae are 8 to 12 times more attractive to Varroa than worker larvae. As long as you have the self-discipline to come back every week to check the frame and cut out the sealed drone, this method allows for continual trapping of continual trapping of mites. Now, if you compare this to the other methods that you'll see, if you go to the bee catalogs, you'll see the green plastic drone frames. I don't recommend those because if you exchange a sealed green plastic drone frame with an empty one, there is a delay of about 8 to 9 days before the drone larva is mature enough to attract mites again. In that intervening period, the only place for the mites to go is your worker larva. Compare that to this frame, which we just put back in, which was still going to attract mites, even though we'd already cut out a portion of mites and drones. The Dutch-German drone brood method. This is a separate mite trapping method. The Dutch-German drone method is more complicated, but it's based upon a very simple concept. In this method, a frame of drone eggs and larvae is placed into the colony when the mites have no other brood to enter. And because there is no other brood, the only place the mites can find larvae is in the trapping frame. It's like a Trojan horse in reverse. The mites hop into these cells, and then when the drone larva is sealed, the frame is removed and those captured mites are destroyed. That's the essence of this method. That principle is very simple. I decided that this method was for me after I read that one university in Holland ran a 60 colony apiary using this method for 5 years with no chemical treatment. But to be honest, they never said how many grad students they were using. Well, that's another story. Even though the underlying principle is simple, it does take some experience and planning to be able to utilize it. These 3 Dutch researchers, Callis, Boot, and Beetsma, wrote this and a number of other works on trapping mites in drone brood. It's well worth reading them if you want more information than I'm presenting here. I've been using these variants of this method since 2017, and it's advanced in that it requires more planning and there are more things that can go wrong with it. I'm only going to give you a brief overview of this method because I don't think most beekeepers are prepared to try it. If you do have an interest, please take a look at my YouTube channel, which I'll give a reference to at the end. Last summer, I made a series of 4 videos in real time as I moved the colony through this process. The first colony is a timeline. The second, I might have said colony, but the first column is a timeline. The second column refers to the parent colony, and the last column refers to its split, which I call the daughter. In this method, the parent colony produces an egg drone frame. A split is taken away that has all the other brood. The egged drone frame then traps all the mites from the parent colony because there is no other brood present. The parent colony will harvest the spring honey, and the daughter split is queenless. A queen cell is selected from the emergency cells that are made, or a grafted cell is added. But before the larva in the daughter colony can attract a mite, an egg drone frame from another colony is added, and the mites in the daughter are trapped. The daughter colony gathers the summer honey. So feel free to take a photo of this slide and think about it later. It's worthy of a whole lecture by itself. I'm going to count to 10 to give you a chance to take a photo if you want to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Goodness knows how many of you did. This is a frame of drone brood I uncapped to show how effective mite trapping can be. These mites were trapped in the frame and physically removed from the hive. We are never going to be able to trap them all, but we can trap enough of them to make a difference in colony survival. Let's revisit this slide just to show you where we are. I spent a good deal of time on the second point, physically removing the mite, but that's not the only way that their influence is reduced. I operate on the assumption that if my bees die over winter, it is almost always because of the effects of mite. In the spring of 2011, I had only 4 out of 11 colonies alive, and it was then that I discovered the work of Mel Bizzleton and his emphasis on the brood break as a method of mite control. I realized that all of the 4 surviving colonies had endured a brood break. A brood break is a period of broodlessness when there is no larva of any kind for the mites to enter and damage. In the natural cycle of events, there is a brood break every year in a wild bee colony when it swarms. And we can reproduce that effect by starting colonies from cells or timing the addition and release of queens to ensure that there is a period of broodlessness. I usually obtain a brood break by introducing queen cells when I start a new colony. Mel Bizzleton's work can be seen at his website. He's a Michigan beekeeper. He's somebody you should know. And I'll provide a reference to his website at the end. The bees don't care where the cells come from. I've used swarm cells, cells produced using Mel's on-the-spot method, OTS he calls it. I have bought locally grafted cells, and I have learned how to graft my own cells. If you have a local beekeeper who produces queen cells, go pay him or her a visit and see if their bees are the kind of bees you want in your apiary, and then get on their list for queen cells. This photo was taken 4 or 5 years before I became confident enough to graft my own cells. This photo is just here to show the orange cell protectors I use to hold and protect the queen as she emerges. The cells are placed in the protectors and then pushed into the side of the comb in the middle of a 3 to 5 frame nuke amongst brood. And that brood was taken from a colony where it's been kept above an excluder for a week, separate from the queen, so that the brood itself is a week old before it reaches there, and that ensures a brood break before larvae become mature again to attract mites. You might be wondering why I am emphasizing the brood break. Well, mites, when you use a brood break, mites are exposed to grooming, so other bees will chew them off. 1 to 2% of mites a day die that way. When the surviving mites reinfest brood, their reproduction suffers for 1 to 2 cycles. What that means is they are just not as fecund. They just don't produce as many offspring. And then a point that Mel makes that I've not seen anywhere else, but I don't see why it couldn't happen. Mel suggests that they might all rush into the first cells available at the same time and then be removed as the larva dies, which I think is really interesting. Now, this brood break logic is counter to what traditional beekeeping teaches. In traditional beekeeping, to make the most of our short season, they emphasize the introduction of mated queens and don't make a deal about having any kind of brood break. And so there's barely a pause in brood production, and continuous brood production favors continuous mite production. In a more perfect world, we would be able to simply requeen our colonies with stock from this list and forget about Varroa. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I support the use of these lines of bees because for 4 or 5 months of the year, we can't access them. And it gives me comfort to know that during the winter, there is a chance that the bees might be working on eliminating some of the mites by themselves. And that might sound contradictory. You might say, well, what about truth in advertising? Do these lines reduce mites? Don't they? What use is resistance? Well, unfortunately, it seems that what happens in a large hive in the summer, when you have your supers all stacked on your hives and life seems good and the bees suspend their mite-defeating behaviors, and instead they turn all their attention to gathering nectar and making honey. And here in the Midwest, that's the problem, because we have fantastic honey flows. And while the bees are distracted with making honey, these mite-defeating behaviors are suspended and mite populations explode. So this brings me back to Mel Disselkin, because Mel stated this point in his lectures. Big colonies are only needed for honey or splitting, and so use strategies to minimize mites. So take the honey off sooner rather than later, late July, early August, break the big colonies down, and overwinter the nukes. So this is where we are. Now, lifelong learning it's a real thing. In my system, one thing has been built on another, and this slide shows chronologically the tools that I've added to produce an overall biotechnical strategy that has brought me sustainability. And the journey's been like acquiring a toolbox of learnings that I can reach into, and it has kept me from the use of chemical mite treatments in my beekeeping practice. And my hope is that some of these learnings will be helpful to you too. Which brings us to the selected references, and I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
So one of the first questions that popped up about the drone brood and the drone culling,
Yeah.
do you freeze the drone before giving it to the chickens? Because my chicken and bee yards are adjacent. If the mites aren't frozen off, would they find their way back to the bees, or am I overthinking this?
I think you're overthinking it. We used to have chickens, and I give it right to them. There's no bees coming to the uncapped larva. The mites just go into the grass, so the ants will get them. So there's no chance they're going back.
All right, and then how many days between when you make a hive queenless, and then let's say if you're introducing a queen cell, how many days do you wait after queenlessness before you introduce a cell?
How many days do what I do is I'll take the nukes. I'll do it the same day or the day before, depending how many I've got. Because when you take the cell is protected in the orange queen cap, so in the orange protector, so the bees can't access it from the side to break it down. And because we're starting a nuke and I'm taking it away from the parent site, there's no old bees in there. It's the old bees, the foragers, the flyers that are more inclined to damage the cells. And so the bees work out that they are queenless within a short time, and then a few days later the cell emerges and they're happy. Oh well, I'm ascribing them human emotion. They're content. Even that might be a human emotion, but you get the picture.
It works for me. So Claire wants to know, do you only have nukes now, or do you have any 8 to 10 frame colonies?
I've got 10 frame equipment. I tend to, well, my goal in a perfect world, if I arrive at winter, then I've got everything in 5 frame equipment for winter. But I'll use the 10 frame equipment to make honey with when I'm making honey, because otherwise the boxes would become so tall. I'm 5 feet 8. And so for me, I'll run honey usually in a single deep, sometimes a double deep. If I get any more than 4 supers on, it's above my shoulder height, and that's really bad body mechanics, and I want to keep my back. So if it was in the 5 frame equipment, it just gets real tall and real tippy.
Claire had a follow-up question about your nukes and the sizes of your frames or your colonies. She also wanted to know how you attach the queen cells with the protectors, the orange protectors, when you put them into the nukes. How do you place them?
Yeah, yeah. If you can you flat backwards, James, to the picture of those cells? Not the one before. That one there. So that brown part that looks like circus peanuts or whatever, that actually just drops right into the cell protectors. The cell protectors are just little tubes with a little nubbin on the side. Some of them, those ones actually just pushing to one side of the cell with that nubbin at the top, and some of them have got nubbins on both sides, and you can dangle them between. And so when you put them in that way, they just stay there. I've got the friend who I bought those cells from before. He doesn't even put them in cell protectors, but I feel kind of clumsy without that. I'm worried that if I squish the cell itself, I'll damage the cell. So I'm happier with the stability and the structure that the orange cell protector provides. You'll find them in the bee catalogs.
Yeah, personally, I enjoy using the orange ones with the tabs on both sides, because I will forget which face of the frame I pushed the one-sided ones into, and end up either rolling them out or breaking them or something. Who knows? I forget. Let's see. Conrad's question for you is, where'd it go? Is there a reason you switched to using queen cells rather than letting the bees raise their own emergency queens the way Mel describes?
Yes, because I find that I wanted to have the advantage of BSH, and I bought breeder queen in 2014, 2017, 2020. And if you have a breeder queen and you learn to graft, you have a little more control. Mel's method is fine if you're not running a whole lot of colonies, or even if you are running a whole lot of colonies and don't want to graft. There's nothing wrong with Mel's method at all.
So, Adrian, this question comes from me. A lot of what you've described here seems like a lot of work. Definitely takes perseverance, diligent note taking, so you know what, when, where, how, and what you've already done, especially if you're trying to track what you're doing. Pardon me. Yeah. How long on average do you spend per yard when you're implementing these brood breaks and culling methods?
That's a fun question, because it's a balance, right? Because you want to do it so it's scratching your beekeeping itch, but then it can end up with the tail wagging the dog. So what I do is I titrate my bee yard size to as many bees as I can work in 2.5 to 3 hours. Because in the summer, in July, it's hotter than heck, and you're sweating through every pore of your body, and the sweat's running down into your eyes. And so I'm done in about 2.5 to 3 hours, and I visit each yard every week in the summer. So I'm spending at least a day, I would say, total a week. And in the spring, I sell down to about 20 to 30 colonies. And then by the fall, if I'm real organized, I've kept it down to 60. And if I've let the bees go nuts, then I'm up to 80.
Yep, that's an awful lot of work in the summertime, which kind of goes back to the importance of wearing ventilated protective gear if you're wearing it. And just to double back a little bit there for folks that are listening, Adrian's using nurse talk when he says titrate, which means to either go, build up or build back. So you're either reducing or increasing your colony size based on the favorable time frame, what you're looking for to spend in that particular yard. Titrate.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions? All right, Adrian, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here with us. Thanks for running through this with me the other day. Sorry the recording didn't work out, but it was a pleasure to have you live regardless. So let me finish up and conclude with everybody by giving you an overview of the Sustainable Beekeepers Guild of Michigan. Facebook group is open to everybody. It is an open forum. You don't have to be a member of the club to participate in that forum. We also have the Facebook group for the Michigan treatment-free beekeepers. It was a little bit of a different posting and conversation policy between the two groups, but the reason for that is clear and laid out in those policies on those particular venues. We want to remind you about some of the efforts that we're hoping to aim for with our queen breeding and nuke exchange program for beekeepers. We want to be able to establish a network and a co-op of beekeepers that are practicing a lot of the things that you're hearing and experiencing today, so that others can benefit from the genetics in the region and also improving the genetics in your region. I like to say I'm not an altruistic beekeeper. I want you to have better bees so that your better bees are helping my bees be better also. I probably will never say that the same way twice. We are also working on a mentor group network development. You know, we want other beekeepers to have access to mentors who are, you know, providing treatment-free and chemical-free practices. And it's not just the chemical-free, treatment-free aspect of beekeeping, but you're learning basic hive management. You're learning what you need to do when it comes to splitting. You're learning about bee biology, and you're getting hands-on frame time. And then Terry had mentioned that we're discussing how to create a hive or badge program for beginners. We want you guys to be able to earn a hive. You know, the Bee Guild has a plan for you to complete these processes, and at the end of this period of apprenticeship, you not only get the badge of honor of having had completed that, but we'll provide you with your first nuke. We'll give you your first set of bees, and we'll give you some good bees. All right. We also want to encourage you to reach out to us. Send me an email, send me a text, whatever you need to do. Stop by the webpage for the Guild, shoot us future speaker and topic recommendations. And the last thing I wanted to cover is that we're working on a forum for individuals to come together and share, other than the Facebook venue, not that that's not sufficient, but a sustainable beekeeping guild where people can come together and they can express their views and opinions, and they can share like-mindedness in these efforts without having to face the barrels of some of the more mainline forums where you can easily get distracted or even harshly treated for just having the idea or notion that it's possible the bee could take care of itself and its genetics. We want to be able to give people that place and venue to learn from each other on a consistent basis. We don't have to just wait for conferences and meetings to get that information. You can go right online, go into that forum and share that info with each other and have access to each other. With that, I thank you all so much for those who have stopped by. I thank you all so much for hanging in there with me, and to the last 20 or so participants that are just there by a thread. Have a good night. Enjoy your spring, and we'll be talking to you soon. Good night.